program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you for joining us for this very important conversation on governance, economic development, and democracy in Kenya, here in Washington, D.C. So we have here with us, well, we have a lot more people joining us from Kenya, from here in the US, from all over the world online. So at the Carnegie Endowment's Africa program, we focus on the economic, the political, and the transnational issues that are shaping Africa today and that are of relevance to the continent's future. A key objective of our work is to shape global discourse and policy on Africa towards outcomes that advance prosperity and stability. We aim to achieve this objective by facilitating meaningful dialogue between African stakeholders, be they policymakers or scholars or thought leaders, and their counterparts here in the United States, but also in global capitals. Today, we are having a conversation on politics and policy in one of Africa's most dynamic countries, Kenya. The Republic of Kenya is one of Africa's most prominent democracies. The country has a vibrant media and civil society landscape with dozens of registered parties. With a GDP of $98 billion, Kenya is the sixth largest economy in Africa, and it is certainly the largest in the sub-region of East Africa. In fact, until the COVID-19 pandemic struck, Kenya was one of the continent's fastest growing economies, with an average annual economic growth rate of nearly 6% between 2010 and 2018. Kenya recently reached lower middle income status within the 21st century and has a diversifying economy with a thriving tech startup scene. It has pioneered mobile money. We all have heard of M-pesa, for example. It has tourism, horticulture, agribusiness, and other industries. As a result, the Kenyan economy is quickly rebounding compared to a number of other African countries from the COVID-19 shock, with growth in 2021 rising above pre-pandemic levels. Of course, challenges of poverty and inequality remain, as with many countries around the world. And abroad, Kenya is a member of the East African community, as well as the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. The government ratified the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in 2018, and Kenya currently occupies one of the 3 non-permanent member seats from Africa at the United Nations Security Council. I think we're all aware of the strong statement given recently at the UN Security Council from Kenya. Kenya's relations with the United States are expanding and deepening, and in 2018, this bilateral relationship was elevated to a strategic partnership built on 5 pillars: economic prosperity, defense, democracy and civilian security, multilateral and regional issues, and public health. It is an honor, therefore, to host this important discussion with our distinguished guests today on governance, economic development, and democracy in Kenya, in East Africa, and indeed the rest of the continent. So we have with us today His Excellency William Ruto, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. We also have with us today US Congress member Representative Karen Bass, who is a member of the US House of Representatives. But before I go any further, I am delighted to mention that we have in our midst today the President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Mariano Florentino Kea. And before joining Carnegie quite recently, Tino Kea was a Justice of the Supreme Court of California. He was also a Stanley Morrison Professor at Stanford Law School and directed Stanford University's Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. He has also served 2 US presidents in a variety of federal government roles, including as the first special assistant to the President of Justice and regulatory policy in the Obama administration. So Tino, over to you. He's joining us virtually from California.
Thank you, Zainab. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. We are very happy to do this event and to host Deputy President William Ruto. Very happy also to welcome my fellow Californian, Congresswoman Karen Bass from the City of the Angels. No doubt this event will break some new ground, but it's also a great example of the tradition we have here at the Carnegie Endowment, where we enable dialogues about global policy with the people making crucial decisions. I want to take 3 or 4 minutes to give you some context about why events like this matter to us so much. First, Africa matters enormously in a changing world. It matters for economic well-being, labor, civic life, climate, geopolitics, and security. We were founded as an organization 112 years ago to help make the world more secure and peaceful. Today, that mission unquestionably has to focus on Africa. The population of sub-Saharan Africa will double by 2050. Before long, Africa will have the plurality of the global workforce. None of that is lost on us. We realize that essentially the fate of Africa is the fate of the world. Second, I want to acknowledge something that all of you know, which is that East Africa is a dynamic region and Kenya is absolutely central to it and changing quickly. I'm struck by how Kenya is one of Africa's leading economies. It's urbanizing quickly. By 2015, Kenya will have more urban dwellers than all of Africa did in the middle of the 20th century. It'll be crucial to the future of Africa and beyond as a middle-class, middle-income country and a thriving tech scene that it's providing the world and a vibrant multi-party democracy. And Kenya's foreign policy matters around the world. To give you just one current example that's on all of our minds, no doubt, think about the rousing speech given by Kenyan Ambassador to the UN, Martin Kimani, supporting the Ukraine and cautioning against a world where might makes right. That's a speech that was heard around the world. Third, governing and institutions are a challenge not only in Africa, here in the United States, in Europe, and really throughout the world. That's the work that Deputy President Ruto knows so well from his previous service, leading ministries of agriculture, higher education, science and technology, and home affairs. It means helping institutions responding better to public needs, quality education, clean water, reliable courts. So whether it's Kenya or California, we're in this journey together. Given the climate crisis and economic dislocation, the challenges ahead are not easy, but we're going to focus on trying to bring the best ideas, the best solutions to governments around the world, and this sort of dialogue is going to help us. Finally, as we make sense of these pressures and opportunities, we might bear in mind especially the next generation. The kids who are in high school or younger right now, which is a major and growing segment of the population in Kenya and elsewhere in Africa. That population is a source of hope, but also part of the challenge, how to build a world where they can thrive and do better. How will a young person growing up in one of the region's growing cities have her life unfold? How will these stories of people like that affect peace and security around the world? We have enormous work to do to build a better world for them. Today's dialogue, I hope, will help us explore how we best do that. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Deputy President. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. And I look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tino, for really reminding us why Africa matters to the world. So now I will be inviting our main guest to the podium very shortly. But before I do that, let me go over some housekeeping rules. I'm very happy to see you all mark. William Ruto and Congresswoman Karen Bass. We will move to our sit-down conversation with both distinguished guests, also with Professor Ken Opalo. And following this discussion, we will have a live question and answer session with both our in-person audience, but also those joining us virtually. So just a few words on His Excellency William Ruto. As you're all aware, he's the first elected deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, and he's also a presidential candidate in the upcoming election in Kenya in August this year. The deputy president joined mainstream politics in 1997 after his election as a member of parliament. Dr. Ruto was also chairman of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Constitutional Reform in the 9th Parliament, leading the process that put Kenya on the road to a new constitution. He later served as Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Higher Education. Dr. Ruto, among many things, holds a PhD in plant ecology from the University of Nairobi. I now invite His Excellency William Ruto to give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Osman. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me take this opportunity to first thank Kanaki for giving us an opportunity to engage with the stakeholders, policymakers, decision makers, and other public institutions in a conversation about Kenya, about our region in East Africa, and hopefully we will also have a conversation about our continent. I want to, in a very special way, thank my team for putting this together and for Carnegie for providing the platform for us to have this conversation. I am looking forward to sharing my thoughts and perspectives on what I think should be in Kenya and in our region. I am looking forward to sharing my ideas on the next political dispensation in our country. I am looking forward to sharing our thoughts on what contributions Kenya can make in the global stage. I think the statement by Ambassador Kimani on the status in Ukraine is the consummate position of the government and people of Kenya, recognizing that we live in a global village where we share same space irrespective of what countries we come from. We share the same principles and tenets of human rights and democracy and the rule of law to which we all subscribe. I am delighted that I will be having this conversation at the cusp of a very determinate and a transition election in Kenya. I know we have many friends across the globe who want to know how well we are and how prepared we are for that election. From the position I sit, I want to assure all our friends that Kenya shall continue to be a free country, a democratic country, a peaceful country. And before and after the elections, that will continue to be the case. We are all determined to make sure that this election is not about what is in it for leaders only. It's going to be about what is in it for the people of Kenya. And the people of Kenya will be making choices informed by the body of information that's available to them. First and foremost, what is critical to the people of Kenya in this election is our democracy and the importance of Kenya being a nation governed by the rule of law, constitutionalism, and building on our past to complete our democratic transition. Many of our friends know that there have been attempts at trying to reverse the gains we've made as a nation. There have been attempts to try and bring back an imperial presidency, to try and bring back an unaccountable executive, and to try and undermine the independence of the judiciary and the independence of the oversight role of Parliament. It is against that background that many people in Kenya and many friends of Kenya will be watching this election very keenly. Many of our friends will also be looking at how best we create an inclusive society, because inclusion forms the basis of stability. Threats to stability comes from feelings of exclusion politically, and exclusion economically. My team and I will be canvassing the country to make sure that we not only have a robust, broad-based political coalition that ensures that inclusivity is at the center of this election, but like the people of this great country, we've all learned that the trickle-down economic model has benefited fewer people than it was intended. And as a result, the bottom-up economic model is the new model that we want to work on to create broader prosperity, more inclusivity that leaves nobody behind. Kenya is not only a player in the East African community, we are also a robust player in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and our contribution and thoughts around regional integration, as well as our strategic engagement with the United States of America as part of our international engagement will inform some of the discussions we will be having this afternoon. I do not wish to say more than that, maybe just to introduce the people in my delegation. I have my dear wife Rachel here with me, and then I have His Excellency Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who is our former Vice President, who will come along as my colleague. And then we have the rest of the Kenyan delegation. I don't know whether I will ask them to stand up, the rest of the Kenyan delegation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just in the interest of time, I would have mentioned all their names, but I think in the interest of time, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy President, for the clear opening remarks about the importance of the transition in Kenya and given the role Kenya plays in the rest of the continent. I would like to now invite another distinguished guest that we have with us today, Congresswoman Karen Bass. Of course, you all know her, but I want to say a few words about her. She is the U.S. representative for California's 37th Congressional District and serves on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, where she is chair of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, and Global Human Rights. As chair of the subcommittee, Congressmember Bass has acted to build coalitions and support economic growth and partnerships with the African continent, with a goal to transform how the United States engages with African nations and to promote the many opportunities to expand trade and economic growth between America and African nations. Congressmember Bass has traveled to the continent more than 30 times and continues to push to increase diversity among the diplomatic corps serving there. So Congressmember Bass, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I cannot be with you today. It is my pleasure and honor to be with you, though, and I want to thank the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Mrs. Cuellar, Mrs. Usman, for having me here today to speak with His Excellency, Deputy President Ruto of Kenya and Professor Ken Opolo of Georgetown's University School of Foreign Service. First of all, I do have to say that, we are all disheartened by what is happening on the international stage. I was at the State of the Union yesterday, and I'm sure if you saw it, you saw the bipartisan support for the people of the Ukraine. What is going on as we speak this very moment, what is happening to that country, I think, is a tragedy to the world, and I know we all stand in solidarity with the people of the Ukraine. And I want to particularly note that the ambassador from Kenya to the United Nations, the leadership role that is played at the Security Council has been exemplary. And we will all keep the Ukrainian people in mind in our hearts today. Also, a little concern, you should know, on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, as we have watched African students and other African people as they try to leave the Ukraine. And I know that our chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee will be flying to Poland this weekend, because we want to make sure that all of the people who leave Ukraine are able to leave Ukraine safely and are welcomed. So I just wanted to, could not neglect to begin on that note. And as was mentioned in my introduction, I do have the honor of chairing the Subcommittee on Africa in Congress, and it has been my goal and my interest from the moment I was elected to really influence US-Africa relations and to change the way we view the continent of Africa and to lift up the continent, because many times in the US press, what we hear about are the conflicts, we hear about the problems. That's nothing new, because that is the way the US press covers the US as well. But sometimes if the only news you hear about a place is where there's trouble and where there's conflict, you miss the enormity of the African continent. And my focus is to transform that perspective and to focus more on trade. And I love the AU slogan of trade, not aid. And this is so important when it comes to Kenya, because Kenya is so far ahead and such a leader when it comes to East Africa. So I'm committed to strengthening our relationship with African governments, and there's no better time now to increase our cooperation as partners in democracy and economic development. Kenya has shown tremendous dedication to these principles as the strongest East African economy, and a country that has tirelessly demonstrated its dedication to advancing democracy. And of great importance is the preservation of election integrity, strengthening democratic governance, and I know you have an election coming up soon. I had the honor of being an observer at your last election. I wish I could again, but I'm sure that it will be a positive and peaceful one. And both of our countries, frankly, are facing challenges. We have our challenges here in the United States. You wouldn't think that we would, but fighting for the right to vote, even here in the United States, is something that is very high on the agenda of many people here. And Kenya's role in managing regional conflicts and protecting human rights and extending trade and investment opportunities, Kenya has been a leader in all of these efforts, and I applaud Kenya's leadership. Kenya's leadership in the African Union as well. We recently did a resolution, we passed a resolution wanting to strengthen the US ties with the African Union, and particularly excited about the continent trade agreement. And one of the things that we want to look at, and maybe the Deputy President could help us explore this, are there ways for the United States to help in terms of the development of the trade agreement between the African countries? I know that the Deputy President is aware of our commitment to AGOA. We know that AGOA is going to expire in the next few years. And so now is the time to examine. I want to see AGOA reauthorized, but what do we need to do to strengthen AGOA? And what can we do to strengthen trade between African countries? Because one of the challenges that many African countries have, not Kenya, but many African countries have, is their markets are too small to really do business with the United States. But what I am hoping is with the regional economic communities and countries partnering and strengthening the continent-wide trade agreement, that might allow many countries whose economies are not as large as Kenya to be able to trade and reach the scale that would be able to facilitate that trade with the United States. So hopefully we can look at how we can contribute to the development of the Continental Trade Agreement, but also we can contribute in preparation for the reauthorization of AGOA. Kenya is an AGOA standout as one of the leading exporters to the United States, and virtually all of its registered products receive duty-free status. These exchanges benefit both countries, and I certainly want to see that continue. Another area that I've paid particular attention to and have been so excited by is the YALI program that was started by President Obama, the Young African Leaders Initiative. We have fellows that come to the United States every year. Of course, the last couple of years it's been virtual, but this year we have one of the fellows that is working with us in our office. And I think that's one of the most important programs that we have. I would love to know the Deputy President's view of that as well. So I'm working on legislation right now that is passed out of the House and is in the Senate. And that legislation is to make a YALI a permanent program. And that means we want to pass a law to say that YALI will continue. Right now it continues with the discretion of the US, but I don't want there to be discretion. I want it to be permanent. One of the things that I have enjoyed every time I go to the continent is I meet with YALI fellows in every country. Last year, I was in Angola and Namibia and met with YALI fellows. And one of the things that I think is the most exciting about the initiative is that it allows young Africans to get to know each other from different countries. And they often always comment that they wouldn't have had an ability, a venue, a reason to actually interact with Africans from other countries. And YALI provides an opportunity to do that. And YALI's, creating a community that I hope that we continue to do, because to me that just strengthens our relationships and move us away from a relationship of aid and charity that I believe that the African countries are long past. Now I know that everybody has taken a big hit because of COVID, and I was excited last night when the president talked about increasing the export of vaccines on the continent. I don't think that the world has stepped up to the extent that the world should have. So I was happy that we are going to increase our export. I'm also happy that a US citizen who was formerly, he was actually born in South Africa. He's Chinese, and he is a resident of Los Angeles, and he has gone over to South Africa where he was born, and he set up a manufacturing plant for COVID vaccines. And that's the way I think that we have to think about the future. It's not always, yes, right now, because we're in a pandemic, we need to export the vaccines. But the more important point is for African nations to have their own capacity to develop vaccines. And we need to share the technology. When you're talking about life and death, we can't be so parochial. We have to understand that this is an international issue. And so I'm looking forward to us moving and developing, and I'm hoping that the manufacturing plant that Dr. Patrick Sunshun is developing in South Africa can be replicated in many different countries. Well, Africa's, initiatives like Kenya's Vision 2030 that works toward democratization, industrialization, and sustainable practices, which aims to uplift the people along with the rest of the economy, I think is, again, just another example of Kenya's outstanding leadership. Kenya's economic projection for 2021 exceeded your own government's expectations, which I think is a really big deal considering the environment of COVID. And my office and the Biden administration are committed to strengthening our bilateral relations with African countries, and will continue to show our support through diplomatic relations and legislation. I look forward to the discussion this evening as we hear more from the Deputy President and experts from U.S. institutions. And once again, want to thank the Carnegie Endowment and Georgetown University for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass, for those insights, for your perspectives on a wide range of issues, from Ukraine to Kenya's role in East Africa, to the need for trade, intra-African trade, thinking about what comes after AGOA, and young people, YALI, and all of those important initiatives. We'll now have a more expanded conversation on governance, on democracy, on economic development in Kenya and abroad. And I would like to begin by inviting Deputy President Ruto to have a seat at the podium. And then I would also like to invite my very good friend, Professor Ken Opalo from Georgetown University, who will be leading this conversation. Ken Opalo, I'm sure a lot of you know him, is an assistant professor at the Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. His research expertise includes legislative development, the politics of service provision under decentralized government, education reforms, and emerging democracies. He is widely published, including in journals such as World Development, Journal of Democracy, and a couple of others. So, Ken, over to you, and I'll be joining you as well.
Welcome, everyone, and to you, Honored Deputy President. So we intend to have a free-flowing conversation, and Zainab and I will pose questions, and then at the end we'll open it up to the audience to pose questions as well. I'll begin with a structural question on the Kenyan economy. So, as you said, this August election will be a pivotal election in many ways, and one of the ways in which it will be pivotal is the salience of economic issues in Kenya, especially when we think about the youth, when we think about agriculture, and the need to restructure the Kenyan economy. That said, previously or up until now, the approach has been big infrastructure investments as a way of promoting growth. Do you think that beyond August, there will be political will to restructure the economy to address the imbalances that exist today? Whether we're thinking about demands from the county governments with increasing the devolution allocation share, or we're thinking about interest groups that influence the treasury, thinking about parliament, and the whole budget process. Is there appetite to reform Kenya's public finance management to address the challenges that are central to this year's election?
Thank you very much, Ken. I think restructuring the Kenyan economy is an imperative. It's not an option from where I sit. It is a necessary imperative because where we stand today, we have a huge youth bulge that unless and until it's addressed, it poses a great danger to the country. We have debt that needs to be addressed. We have, as you have said correctly, our investment as a government in our first term was on the hardware, so to speak. That's why we went big on infrastructure, on the rail, and did 700 kilometers of new tarmac, of new rail. On roads, that's why we did 10,000 kilometers of new paved road, on electricity generation and distribution. That's why we went from 2 million people to 8.5 million people connected to electricity. But to a great extent, that was the hardware. The software is what we must address as an existential imperative. And it's not a question of whether there will be appetite. It is, as I have said, an imperative. And that is why this election is an election like no other. This election is a transition election. Transition from the fact that we will have an incumbent president handing over to a new president. Transition because it is transiting into completing our democratization process, and transition because the paradigms are shifting. So investing in deliberate creation of jobs for young people is the next frontier. Investing in agriculture so that we can increase the productivity of our farmers, whether it's milk, whether it's coffee, whether it is tea and horticulture. And just to put it into perspective, that's why we were in Nebraska, and the discussion in Nebraska in the US was about value addition and agro-processing, because that's the new space, irrigation agriculture, that's the new space. We were discussing with companies who are already providing that service in Kenya. And so that whole space of dealing with the 4 million young people who are out of school and college and university, ensuring that increasing the productivity of our farmers, making sure that we are providing the correct seeds, we are making sure that there is fertilizer that can inform the productivity of our farmers, making sure that our dairy productivity is enhanced. That's the space. And much more importantly, making sure that the 10 million odd micro, small, and medium enterprise space is stimulated through access to credit, access to infrastructure, and making sure that there is legislation that protects these small enterprises, startups, and making sure that they can move up the ladder. And at the bottom of all that is making sure that we manage our resources and we contract debt at rates that we can afford, and making sure that to be able to deal with the challenge of debt, expanding the tax base by creating more jobs, creating more viable enterprise, increasing the productivity of our farmers, engaging in value addition, agro-processing, the whole array up to manufacturing. So the structural adjustment of our economy is an imperative, so to speak.
Yeah. Thank you for that response. And I'm told that Congresswoman Bass might be jumping. So I'll race ahead to a foreign policy question to catch up before we continue with the more Kenya-focused discussion. So my next question, Kenya is, as I've been saying, an important global player in the region. Kenya is a strong in terms of China's effort with the Belt and Road Initiative. China has financed many of the infrastructure projects in Kenya. At the same time, the US is also a major partner in terms of foreign relations with the Kenyan government on trade, on security, and other areas. How do you see the relationship with both powers evolving in the medium and long term? after August and beyond?
We have already recognizing the importance of, first of all, let me say, the relationship with our partners globally is even and balanced. It's guided by our Kenyan interests in whatever engagements that we are engaged in. The US does not conflict in any way with our relationship with other countries. That's why recognizing the importance of the US, United States partnership, in 2018, that relationship has now been elevated to a strategic relationship, recognizing the importance of the US and the role they play in our economy. This morning, I had a 3.5-hour engagement with the State Department with my team, because that relationship is that much important. And we have agreed on a couple of areas that will inform the future, whether it is from fighting terrorism, economic development, and how we need to reorganize ourselves around defense, relations, ensuring that the safety and security of people. The entire space, including universal health coverage or public health. So our relationship with the US is robust, it is strategic, and for your information, the many areas that are of focus to us going forward, whether it is investment in labor-intensive infrastructure development, like housing. We have partners already concluding discussions from the US that they will support our job creation infrastructure initiatives. We have a robust engagement with the US on the single most important item in public health, universal health coverage. In fact, it's among the 5 top strategic areas that we are building a relationship with the United States. So we do not think we can say it is the US versus any other country. The US have a special place in the relationship with Kenya.
Let me quickly come in and bring in Congresswoman Bass. I'm sure you have comments and remarks before you have to step away.
Yes, yes. And let me say that I appreciate the Deputy President talking about the special relationship between the United States and Kenya. And then in terms of the United States, of course, you know, the African American population, because we do not know our history in terms of where we come from in Africa. We know that our ancestors were from the continent, but we don't know from where. So we kind of have this tradition in the African American community of we claim the entire continent of Africa. And so it's extra special, not just the US as a whole, but especially as a Black American, and I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that often comes up in Congress is raising concerns about China's role in Africa. And I certainly know that, you know, it is a mixed bag. But whenever that comes up, I always emphasize the United States needs to step up more. If we're critical of what another country is doing, then why don't we step in and do what it is that they're doing? So that is my focus and my emphasis. To what the Deputy President was saying earlier, I am working on legislation on education. When he made reference to the youth bulge, I know that is absolutely an issue continent-wide. And one thing that I would love to hear from the Deputy President as this goes on, I do have to jump, but my staff is paying close attention, is what we could do. We're working on legislation now to help strengthen educational opportunities in many countries, but obviously my focus and emphasis is going to be on the continent. And if there are suggestions or ways that the Deputy President thinks that we could be helpful there, or in strengthening the trade agreement between the nations in Africa, we would be very interested in knowing, always wanting to improve the role that the United States plays on the continent. And then finally, let me just say to the Deputy President that I wish him well. I know he is up for election, and both of us are actually running for election right now as I'm running to be the next mayor of my city. And so I know the stress that he is under. I share that, and I wish him all the luck in the world for success and for a peaceful transition. Thank you very much.
Maybe it is important for me to ask Congresswoman Bass to wish her all the best as she runs for mayor, and I need all the luck you have mentioned. And
thank you. I'm sure you'll do fine.
And we look forward to making a contribution to humanity and making sure that we have a better world to live in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity
Thank
to
you.
meet you today.
Thank you very much for being here with us.
And maybe I should just mention on one thing that she talked about education. It's instructive that as we deal with a huge youth bulge, at the center of making these young people candidates for decent jobs, at the heart of it is training. When we came into office about 9 years ago, the training, especially in our TVETs, in technical and vocational institutions, we had roughly about 90,000 and an enrollment of 90,000 students. Today, we have moved those numbers from 90,000 to 500,000 enrollment. We have built 170 technical training colleges, again to improve access to training, access to skills, access to competence that makes these young people a lot more viable candidates for work. And that's really what she can do in her capacity, pushing the horizon and making sure that education goes all the way to equipping young people with skills and competences so that it makes them a lot more employable and easy to engage.
Great, and her members of her staff are here, so I'm sure we're going to have fruitful conversations after this main event. I wanted to come back on the point about elections, and I think it's kind of an issue that we're all dancing around. You are one of the leading contenders in the upcoming presidential election in Kenya in August. What would you say makes you a compelling candidate to the Kenyan people? But also, very importantly, you know, the truth is there are some people who have some concerns about, you know, whether it's issues around integrity or incidents in the past. So how would you respond to those concerns that people have? And some of them are quite, you know, they're quite valid. So how would you respond to those concerns that they have?
First and foremost, I'm a candidate in this. As you have put it correctly, I am not just a candidate. I am probably the leading candidate in this election. And it's not by default. It is because I have a track record that the people of Kenya know, they feel, and they associate with. And secondly, my team and I have a credible plan that is resonating with the people of Kenya. When you are in that pivotal position, you do not miss people who will say things about you. And that's the nature of politics, right? So we are very clear, and I am acutely focused on making sure that the plan we have, and it's a plan around taking Kenya from where we are today to the next level. And our plan, we've dubbed it the bottom-up economic plan. That involves investments that would create jobs. And we are very clear these are targeted investments to create jobs and opportunity for young people. The second item is investments in agriculture, value addition, agro-processing, value addition, not just to create jobs, additional jobs, but to put money in the majority of people at the bottom of the pyramid. And our investment in that area will not only give us the returns we are looking for, but those returns will be within 2-3 years. That way we can expand the tax base and begin to tackle the challenge of debt. Our approach is to ensure that the micro, small, and medium enterprises that comprise 80% of all business in Kenya is addressed in 3 ways, in 3 fundamental ways. Create the necessary infrastructure for them to thrive, create a legal regime to protect their business, and much more importantly, put in place financial systems that protects these enterprises from predatory lenders. You may want to know that while big corporates access credit at plus or minus 10%, micro, small, and medium enterprises access credit at not 10%, but anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000%. That is the discrepancy, you know, and that's what is destroying opportunity, taking away opportunity from millions of citizens that are in the micro, medium, and small enterprise space. We intend to sort out that structural problem. And maybe just for the record, 15 million Kenyans today are blacklisted on CRB, on Credit Reference Bureau. That is half the working population of Kenya. And that tells you the toll that predatory lenders have taken on the people of Kenya. It is a matter of urgency. And that's why when I told you sorting out our economic situation is an imperative. It's not an option that we are looking at. And that plan also includes making sure that everybody carries a proportionate burden of health insurance. Today, the people at the bottom of the pyramid pay as much as 10% for health insurance. William Ruto, Deputy President, pays 0.80 before 1%. So that's the discrepancy. That's the inequality. That's what we must sort out. And as a result, we have a huge population that have been locked out. So our approach is to lower the costs for the people at the bottom of the pyramid and get people like myself and others to pay their rightful share. That health insurance is going to be graduated and based on everybody's income as opposed to giving static figures. So sorting out that space creates the bottom-up effect on everybody. Getting the jobless into jobs, getting the people who are paying high credit, access to credit, getting our farmers' productivity up, getting those who have no access to health to have access to health. And we believe with this plan, we can take the country forward. Let me speak to the last item that you have mentioned on integrity. Integrity is an important subject in this election. Accountability, the fight against corruption, is a very important subject in this election. And speaking about integrity, our position and my personal position is that we must have an accountable government. We must have accountable public officials. And that accountability must be built around institutions. It's not for me to decide that Ken is corrupt or Zainab is corrupt. Institutions. The moment it is subjective, the moment it is personalized, then it runs the risk, as it has done in Kenya, of being used as a political tool against your competitors. It must be on the basis of institutions, and that's why our approach is, number one, immediately we come into office, we will operationalize the judicial fund. Operationalizing the judicial fund, which is in the Constitution, but has deliberately not been operationalized because there are people who want to continue to use the war against corruption as a political tool against their opponents. That's why they do not want to operationalize the constitutional institutions that would actually do the fight against corruption effectively. So operationalizing the judicial fund will do three things. Number one, it will give the resources to the judiciary to hire the men and women who can then prosecute cases. Number two, it will give them the opportunity to build the software and the training of those people. And number three, it would make it that much more easy to determine cases within the shortest time possible. For your information, it takes anywhere between 10 and 15 years to prosecute one case, one corruption case. That's why I think it's correct for people to say justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. The second item, which we will operationalize immediately, is to make sure that the criminal justice organs, including the Inspector General of Police that carries out investigations, the Director General, the Director of Criminal Investigations Department, and all those other institutions have not only constitutional independence as it is, but they also have operational and financial independence. Today, all investigations, criminal investigations, investigations of corruption are carried out by institutions that depend on the office of the president to give them the money. The law provides that these institutions should have their own financial independence, complete with accounting officers and their own money, that they don't have to depend on the office of the president or indeed any other office to prosecute matters corruption. And the third issue for us is to make sure there is no budgeted corruption. Today, you have close to 100 billion Kenya shillings budgeted every year that has no oversight in opaque institutions. And that amount has grown fivefold, between 4 and 5-fold in the last 10 years. And where you have accountability problems, where you have oversight challenges, the more money you put in opaque institutions, the greater the corruption in there. It is our position that we should get away and make sure that every coin is accounted for. Lastly, and this is the reason why some of us were said to be against the handshake, you know. The handshake took away the oversight role of the opposition. In Kenya today, we do not have an opposition. There is a mongrel of an organization. Nobody knows what the hell it is. People don't know whether we have the opposition in government or the government in the opposition. It's quite a maybe scientists, maybe policymakers in this great institution in Carnegie could do research on what is going on in Kenya. Because for all intents and purposes, the opposition is running government and government is running the opposition, which is quite a situation.
By handshake, you mean the alliance? For those of us
the alliance between what was supposed to be the governing party and the opposition party, that ended up in a situation where the whole of that arrangement actually did 4 fundamental things. Number one, because of that conundrum where government decided to work with the opposition, and the opposition decided to become part of government, committees that are supposed to be chaired by government are chaired by the opposition, and that kind of thing. What happened? We lost the opposition, we lost the governing party, we lost the government agenda, and we ended up, all of us, as losers, because we lost almost 4 years chasing a mirage, you know, that did not really work. Where does it leave us now? It leaves us now, the supposed opposition leader has become a puppet of government, and the leader of the ruling party is now a refugee in the opposition. So it's quite a situation.
I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and just raise your hand and I'll point to you. So we have one hand over here.
Thank you to Zainab, and the Carnegie Endowment for this great session. So I have a quick question, and my question is, you've talked a lot about this bottom-up agenda, but a lot of what I hear you saying is very similar to Kenyatta's Big Four, right? You're talking about the ordinary Kenyan, improving access to healthcare, agricultural extension services, health insurance. I mean, we know Big Four agenda was food security, affordable housing, universal healthcare, job creation. So what exactly makes your bottom-up agenda different from either what we've seen over the last 9 years or what the other opposition candidate, well, previously opposition candidate, Raila Odinga, would do, right? What exactly, can you just kind of flesh it out for us? What exactly would be different in your policy? Thank you.
Can you also introduce yourselves when asking the questions, please, and make the questions brief because we are running out of time.
My name is Amaka, and I run the Africa practice at a global political risk advisory firm called Eurasia Group.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, Your Excellency will take a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you, Your Excellency? My name is John Tomaszewski. I'm senior professional staffer working on Africa at the Center Foreign Relations Committee. And we've been watching with great attention the work that Kenya has been doing at a regional level in the Horn, East Africa, on peace and security issues. And I'd like to hear a little bit about your views, whether it be Somalia, Ethiopia, Uganda, East Africa community, just how you see yourself, should you be elected president, playing a role in that space. Clearly, American foreign policy is shifting very hard towards depending on Kenya, looking towards Kenya, not only as a peacemaker, but as a security partner anyway. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
So we'll take those two questions. And Your Excellency, on the second question, I'd also like to speak to the impending inclusion of the DRC into the East African community, what it means for Kenya.
Thank you. I quite agree with Madam Ivanga. I quite agree with her that there could be some similarity between described and the Big Four. And that's not by default. We had a great plan called the Big Four. Unfortunately, we never got the time to implement it. It didn't work. And it didn't work because we got friends. We got friends who came and joined. Okay. I'm saying we had a great plan. In fact, if you have a bit of the history, if you have a bit of history, in our first term, we decided that we were going to invest. Try this one. Let me try this one. I was saying, if you have a bit of history, in our first term, we deliberately decided to go heavy on infrastructure by way of laying a foundation that would then help us do our second term. That's why we invested close to 350 billion Kenya shillings on a standard gauge railway, 700 kilometers, 10,000 kilometers of tarmac, electricity generation and distribution, and building a whole stage of training using our technical training colleges. Unfortunately, fortunately that went very well, and we did a fantastic job, and we won our second term resoundingly because of that effort. We developed the Big Four plan, and this was supposed to be our second term agenda. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and it didn't work out because from where I sit, I am now beginning to look at it as though it was deliberate. It was actually sabotaged. Because when we got involved in this story of the handshake, the coming together of the opposition leader and the president, priorities changed. There was no more Big Four. The focus on creating jobs for young people went down the drain. The focus on universal health coverage went down the drain. The focus on manufacturing did not happen. The focus on agriculture went up in smoke. So we got new priorities, and the new priorities were how we are going to change the constitution. So we got involved in another conundrum called the BBI, called Building Bridges Initiative. It never built no bridge. It broke so many bridges. And we ended up in a mess. Because for 4 years of our term, we were involved in this exercise, trying to change the constitution unconstitutionally, trying to reverse all the gains we had made in our progressive constitution, trying to recreate an imperial president that had taken us 30 years to fight. Thank God that the judiciary stopped that whole charade. And it ended up at a place called null and void in the judiciary. There's been a concerted attempt to resuscitate this BBI monster. And there is even a pledge by our competitors that if they ever get anywhere near office, they will bring it back. I do not know how an imperial president is good for any country. I do not know how a compromised judiciary that has a supervisor appointed by the executive is good for any country in the globe, let alone Kenya. And I do not know how a compromised legislature can provide oversight over the executive. I mean, it's really tragic that that's the position where we are. So, to answer your question directly, we never got opportunity to do some of the very good ideas that were in our plan for second term. And as a person who had participated in crafting those beautiful initiatives, it's only fair that given an opportunity, I would begin there and now take it up to the next level. And maybe to respond to my good brother, we are looking forward to the Democratic Republic of Congo joining the EAC. Democratic Republic of Congo is a very important partner with a 90 million population. We share a lot in common with DRC. They use our Mombasa port as an outlet. We have a lot of business already that goes on between DRC and the rest of the member states of the EAC. You may want to know that the EAC, the intra-trade in the EAC is close to 20%. In fact, it's the most progressive trading bloc in the African continent. And therefore, DRC would be leveraging on that progress that has been made. And as we look at it, the EAC will actually be the trailblazer for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. You can easily build on the successes of the EAC and build them into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And I see, from where I sit, Kenya playing a very pivotal role. And for Kenya to play that pivotal role, I was sharing with the Assistant Secretary of State this morning, you need a Kenya that is stable and democratic. If you have a country, an anchor country like Kenya, that is not stable, it cannot play the anchor role. It cannot play the leadership role. And in my very honest opinion, the way to stabilize Kenya is to make sure that it is democratic and it is prosperous. That's how you create a stable country. And democracy is on the ballot in this election. Inclusivity is on the ballot in this election. The stability of Kenya is on the ballot in this election, in the sum total of it. So that's why this election is very important. And to give you my assurance that I see Kenya playing a very important role in Somalia, in South Sudan, in terms of regional peace. But I also see Kenya playing a very important role in the EAC economically and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area economically. That will be really the impetus that Kenya can give.
I think with that, unfortunately, we have to stop because we're already out of time. If you have any questions, you can, I'm sure His Excellency and his team will be around, and you can get answers in person. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Ken.
Over to you, Zain.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those candid views. I really appreciated the points you made. In fact, they seemed quite heartfelt about increasing productivity, jobs creation, investments in labor-intensive industries, and all of the headway you are making on that in that regard. Definitely, that's what Kenya needs. That is also what a lot of African countries need, frankly, given that it's a continent in which we have 13 to 15 million people joining the labor market every year in need of jobs. You also emphasize the importance of accountable institutions, building institutions in order to ensure that we fight corruption in many African countries, that we ensure that the war on corruption goes beyond personalistic and individualistic sentiments. And finally, emphasizing the role of Kenya in East Africa, the fact that for Kenya to be able to continue playing that leadership role, it needs to be a strong democracy. So, these are the conversations that we are here to facilitate at the Carnegie Africa program, to ensure that, Africa's important countries, every country on the continent is important, but Africa's anchor countries have the opportunity, these platforms, to showcase the ideas that they have, initiatives, and to foster meaningful global partnerships that can help advance those initiatives that can bring prosperity and stability to the vast majority of Africans. So I would really like to thank you. I want to thank your delegation. I also want to thank, of course, Congresswoman Bass, who was able to join us, the president of Carnegie, Tino Kea, who joined us also, as well as, of course, Ken Opalo, who expertly steered the discussion today. Of course, thank you very much to all our guests here in person for joining us. The world is just reopening. Well, we're not out of the pandemic yet, but we're all trying to find our feet. Even our microphones are misbehaving, and they're not quite sure whether we are back to normal. Of course, thank you also to our online audience, people who joined us from around the US, from Kenya, from other African countries, from all over the world. Finally, I would like to thank our dynamic team at the Carnegie Endowment for making this event a success. A lot of work went behind the scenes. Notably, I would like to mention Juliet Ovadia, Alexander Chenaidi at the Africa Program, Catherine Buchanan, Cliff, Jaja Pranata, Nikita, Sahul, Sam, and Nina. Thank you very much for making this event a success. And then one final thing before we leave, do feel free to hang around. We have some refreshments the Deputy President and his team are willing and really looking forward to engaging with you all. So have a lovely evening, ladies and gentlemen.